Thanks to all. So now we're going to open the floor to questions for Professor Nestle or Lomax. Well, yeah, you spoke so much about food, but do you have any questions? Yes, okay.
I have two questions. First for Professor Nestle. I have a question. Michelle Obama's program, did it do any change throughout the years? This is one. I'm sorry, I got another question for you. Did you ever consider forbid using high fructose corn in the, just forbid using it at all? Okay.
Let me deal with high fructose corn syrup. It's just sugar. Why would you ban sugar? It would break my heart. I don't think so. It's just sugar. There's nothing, it's just cheap sugar, that's all. Why would you ban it? That's not the issue. The question of Michelle Obama is a much more complicated one, and there's not much time, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I'll just say, yes, I think she had an enormous impact in raising issues of childhood obesity to public attention. There have been many, many analyses of what her Let's Move program has done, but the idea that you have a First Lady of the United States who's interested in the same issues that I am is just thrilling beyond belief, and I applaud it.
Yeah. So I come from the private sector, and I was interested to know more about, you were touching on these issues of business. What I heard in your discussion, Marion, was about like Coca-Cola and their funding, which I could hear. I've worked in CSR, corporate social responsibility consulting, and I could hear that would be the kind of thing that they would put into a CSR report, saying, "Oh, well, we fund research about these kinds of things to improve the world." And I've worked in experiences where an agricultural fertilizer company is building a garden project to educate people. Meanwhile, they're continuing to function as they are with their fertilizers and insecticides. So I was curious to hear actually a little bit more articulation from either of you about how you see a responsible private sector engagement within the concept of people voting with their forks or voting politicians, but where that other sector comes in creating a more sustainable system.
I'll just say very quickly that I don't view food corporations as social service agencies. I don't think they have a social service responsibility. Their job is, in the United States at least, their job is to make money for stockholders, and that's what they're supposed to be about. Therefore, it's the job of advocates to insist that they behave in responsible ways that are truly responsible. And they have very limited options. If junk food is what sells and makes profits, they have a real problem. And I think that's the dilemma that we have to live with and figure out. But it's not my job to figure out how food corporations make money. That's somebody else. That's their job.
Thank you. I think that there's probably many ways to skin a cat, and there are many ways to make a profit. So understanding really bottom line over top line, so understanding profitability over sales, and understanding about business models, and okay, fine, how can we operate in a more sort of health conscious way and environmental way, because this is where it all fits in. I think while there's a very strong role for advocacy, and of course this does make change, I think there is some realization that these companies are waking up. They are. I mean, there's a lot. Now, is it enough? I'm not sure. But as I said, the food systems are so entrenched that I think we have to sort of just take it step by step, but we have to take an inclusive approach. I just want to come back on this high fructose corn syrup thing. If we were to get rid of all subsidies, then high fructose corn syrup wouldn't be an option. So, yeah. For example.
Okay. You were talking about policies. So I don't know if you know, but the Ministry of the Treasury Ministry in Israel declared its intention to eliminate all the duty taxes from imported agriculture products. And this is putting really significant threat on the Israeli local agriculture production. Now, I would like to know what is your opinion about what is the importance of local production of agricultural food products compared to imported from China?
I mean, we need both. There are some foods that countries don't make them, they can't produce themselves. They have to import it. Local food tastes better. I think that's really important. It's not traveling.
Yeah, and food security really will be enhanced by having a mixture of supply, whether it be local, regional, or international. The issue, I think, of tariffs and imports, you know what, if we have an integrated approach, then I think the answers will come up. It seems to me what usually happens is that we're trying to put fire out, and then we move to another fire, and then it's another fire, and nobody's really kind of looking at the connectivity of food. And I think once that is done, I think we'll be able to understand things in a much more sort of holistic manner. Maybe I'm too idealistic. I'm not sure. But there has to be some of us, right? But I get the feeling in every country we run from fire to fire. This time it's that. Oh, no. And then there's a crisis on water, so gosh, we go and then protect the water, and there's, it's sort of running to each thing. And I think if we were to look at this issue of, because of course this is about food security, I understand, or this is perceived about food security, availability of food, lowering the price for consumers. So that also has to be in the context of the wider food system.
I have a question for both speakers. Do we expect transnational trade agreements and this is in the context of the introduction of, say, Coca-Cola into emerging markets and the developing world, do we expect transnational trade agreements to limit our ability or others to introduce meaningful policies to limit the consumption of such beverages?
I don't know why I always get to go first. I would be able to make a much more intelligent comment about trade agreements if they weren't done in complete secrecy, so that nobody gets to read what they're about or understand what the arguments are until it's over, and then finally somebody puts them up and then you can't understand them anyway. I'm not an optimist about trade agreements. It's horse trading. Every country wants what's best for itself, and the trade agreements are not the United Nations in which there's any attempt whatsoever to try to think of what's best for the world. So that makes it not very optimistic for looking at protection of the kinds of things that go under the heading of the phytosanitary section of the trade agreements, which are about all of the issues that we really care about, food safety and making decisions about the kinds of food supply that you want in your own country. I'm sorry, that's a completely incoherent answer, but I think that trade agreements are impossible to understand for lay people who aren't sitting there at the table. So at least that's how I feel about it.
Hi. A question for Professor Nestle. Over here. You presented your the fight against soda, the big soda, as an example of low-hanging fruit that had some perhaps easier battles to win or perhaps more potential for public support. I'm curious to know what you see as the next big battlegrounds to be. Is it big beef, big corn? And I'm particularly interested in your opinion about the question of agrotech and GMOs. There was a question in the previous panel about the undue economic clout that gene and seed companies have because of the technology of GMOs, if you have an opinion about that.
Yeah, I think the big issue is marketing to children. And that's a one that is so politically difficult that people have not been able to take it on. The few attempts, Michelle Obama's Let's Move campaign attempted to take on voluntary industry reduction in marketing to children, and it was a complete debacle. It was, there was 4 government agencies were involved in attempting to set nutrition standards for marketing to children, voluntary nutrition standards, and Congress got involved under pressure from the food industry, and it was completely blocked by the industry. The GMO issue is complicated. I wrote a book about it that came out in 2003, and what astounds me so much about GMOs is that the issues haven't changed since 2003. In the States, there's a big labeling initiative, and one state has passed a GMO labeling law. And companies are already starting to label M&Ms, Mars M&Ms, those little colored candies, are labeled as GMO. If you don't want to eat GMOs, don't eat those candies. And lots of other companies are doing that as well. I doubt very much it will change consumption practices for those particular foods. But the real issue in GMOs is who controls the food supply, who makes the decisions about what people are eating, and is the technology going to be used for social purposes, for improving the food supply for everybody, or is it going to be used for promoting monoculture for a few corporations? And that's really what the issue is about. It's very, very difficult to discuss in a political forum. It's not a conversation that the public resonates with very easily. It's much, much easier to talk about, let's label it, or let's talk about safety issues, which are really complicated because there's no evidence that they're unsafe. So that makes it very hard to talk about. So I'm much more concerned about the home issues, marketing to children. I think it's the real frontier for making real progress in improving the health of kids, at least.
Just one more, please.
Do you want to comment?
As we see, looking at animal agriculture being a huge form of food waste in itself, by its very essence, you're wasting tons of food by passing it through animals, which pass most of the energy as feces and heat rather than edible calories. So as we see developing nations increasing their meat consumption, how do we curb that so that both developed nations and developing curb their usage of meat products?
Thank you. The more we talk about these things, the less polarizing it's going to be. For example, let me make a kind of a segue in between the GMO conversation and the meat conversation. In my organization, in the United Nations Environment Programme, you can't say the words genetically modified. It creates a kind of a hugely emotional kind of sort of balloon and burst of massive amounts of kind of energy, and so I did it once, and I'm never going to do it again. So it's best to kind of not talk about it. But no, that's with GM. But I think with meat, I think we can and we must. I was on a panel at the Milan Expo last year, and I was up there with with the Irish Meat Board. These were 4 men who were about twice my size. Very nice guys, actually. We had a beer afterwards. But they were, I mean, I just wanted to talk about the fact that we should eat less meat. And they were so shocked that I should bring it up. I mean, I'm a meat eater. I think it's fine, you know. Meatless Mondays, also good. But the more we talk about it, the less polarizing it becomes. And I think we have to have a broad debate about diets. We have to have a broad debate about these controversial issues. I think with GMO too, you know, this has to start to be discussed more now. The emotion has to be taken out of it. The emotion has to be taken out of it because, like Marion said, there are some very good things that we can do. And we're missing an opportunity by not embracing the positives of it. What's wrong is the model in which it's been currently peddled.
Okay, that's it. Okay,
Thank you very much. We thank all speakers. We're going to break until about 40 minutes from now, till 2 o'clock.